The Interstellar Summit on Tarsus Haven was the kind of event where entire civilizations could declare war over the wrong canopy. Delegates buzzed through the Grand Hall, draped in ceremonial robes, gleaming exosuits, and vapor cloaks that smelled faintly of burnt sugar. It was diplomacy at its finest, veiled threats wrapped in polite nods and translations that always came out sounding more insulting than intended. Lucas Wren, Earth's least celebrated diplomatic attaché, stood awkwardly beside a glowing sculpture of something that looked like a squid mid-existential crisis, holding a half-empty glass of Xerian fizz and trying to figure out how to escape unnoticed. He had attended with one job: stay quiet, don't spill anything, and definitely don't talk to royalty. So of course, by the end of the evening, he had done all three. It began with a tray of floating appetizers. Lucas had been trying to chase down a puffed Glarin tart, possibly sentient, definitely evasive, when a glint of movement caught his eye near the mezzanine balcony. The crowd around him didn't notice, all too busy arguing over trade routes and whose planetary anthem would close the night. But Lucas saw the shimmer of cloaking tech, the way light bent too neatly. A second later, a dart shot out from the air and streaked straight toward the tall, pale figure in the center of the hall. Queen Soraya of Velarun didn't flinch. Maybe she didn't even see it. Maybe that was part of the royal training. Look dignified even when your organs are about to be turned into slurry. Lucas, on the other hand, moved on sheer instinct and caffeine. He lunged not heroically, not gracefully, but with the chaotic momentum of someone who had tripped on his own foot just as the dart sailed past. His shoulder collided with the queen's, knocking her sideways. The dart embedded itself in the base of the decorative squid sculpture, which promptly exploded in a puff of lavender mist and gave a final squeal that sounded weirdly relieved. Screaming, guards, blasters drawn, at least 6 languages cursing in stereo. Lucas was face down on the floor, being pinned by something with too many limbs, while someone else shouted, "Human toxin deployment confirmed?" It took 3 full minutes and the intervention of a very annoyed Velarun advisor to sort things out. Eventually, Queen Soraya rose, unharmed. Her pale skin shimmered faintly, eyes bright like twin moons under her golden braid, and her long ears twitched once, slightly to the left, which Lucas would later learn meant amusement. She stared down at him as if he were a particularly puzzling fungus. "You moved with surprising recklessness," she said. Lucas groaned. "I prefer to call it spontaneous spatial repositioning in the face of airborne projectiles." The queen blinked, slowly. "You threw yourself in front of a sovereign ruler. To be fair, I thought you were a waiter with a snack tray." Someone gasped. Another person fainted. A translator orb buzzed angrily, yet Soraya tilted her head and her mouth curved, barely but unmistakably. By the time Lucas was cleaned up, debriefed, checked for psychic tampering, and presented with a small gift bag of interstellar gratitude tokens, the incident was already being broadcast across 3 sectors. Earth's delegate wanted to kill him. The Velarun delegation wanted to honor him, and Lucas mostly wanted to go back to his room and find out if room service delivered anything without eyes. But instead, he was summoned. The room was circular and soft with shifting hues that responded to emotional states. Lucas's presence caused the walls to pulse an anxious green until a technician recalibrated it to mildly confused beige. Queen Soraya stood at the center, flanked by silent guards in opaline armor. She wore a flowing tunic that shimmered between violet and gold, her long ears twitching as she studied him. "You saved my life." "Technically, I saved the sculpture's life. You were just standing in front of it." Her eyes didn't waver. "On Velarun, such acts are not met with mere thanks. I was hoping for a medal, maybe a sandwich?" She stepped closer. Lucas resisted the urge to back away. Not because she was intimidating, though she was, but because she had the kind of presence that made you feel like your shoes were too loud. She reached into a satchel beside her and pulled out a crystalline object. It glowed faintly, with threads of light spiraling inside it like captured starlight. "This is the soul shard," she said. "It is not just a gift. It is the eternal loyalty of my soul." Lucas blinked. "Wow, that's really something. I don't think I have a thank you card that big. I am bound to you now, she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. As tradition dictates, my oath is sealed. He stared at her, then the shard, then back to her. Wait, is this like a metaphor? Are we talking spiritual loyalty? Or like, you need help moving furniture loyalty? It is deeper than blood, deeper than time. You have saved me. Now I am yours. Yours, Lucas repeated, as in soul-binding yours. Not like pet fish yours? Soraya frowned. Do you mock our customs? Oh, absolutely, but only when they sound like the start of a romantic tragedy. There was a long silence. One of the guards coughed politely, then stood straighter. Lucas swallowed. Look, he said more gently, I really didn't mean to cause any interstellar entanglements. I was just trying to not get skewered. I'm not royalty. I don't even know what side of the fork to use at a diplomatic dinner. She regarded him quietly. Then slowly she held out the soul shard. I will not rescind my vow, but I will give you time to understand it. Lucas took the shard and it pulsed once in his palm. Warm, almost alive. Well, he said, at least it's pretty. Do I have to feed it or walk it? She didn't laugh, but her ear twitched again. To the left. Behind them the wall shifted to a soft lavender. The Velaran queen bowed, deeply, formally, and Lucas Wren, Earth's least reliable attaché, officially became the most diplomatically entangled human in the galaxy. Lucas woke to the soothing voice of the diplomatic AI, calmly announcing that he was late. Not just 5 more minutes late, but doomsday protocol initialized late. He bolted upright, tangled in the silken bedspread of his assigned suite, blinking at the ceiling display which now read, Negotiation Summit commences in 16 minutes. Refreshment service terminated due to urgency. He staggered to the mirror and winced. His hair was doing that weird thing where one side stuck out like it had been electrically seduced. He'd fallen asleep with the soul shard on the pillow beside him, and it had migrated under his chin sometime during the night. It now glowed faintly in his shirt pocket, pulsing to the rhythm of his heartbeat. He wasn't sure if that was touching or mildly horrifying. As he ran out the door with one boot half-zipped and a breakfast bar in his mouth, he nearly collided with a pair of Velaran guards stationed outside. They gave him synchronized nods and turned with military precision to escort him through the glass-paneled corridors. Lucas tried not to look too out of breath, or guilty, or like a man who had accidentally accepted a cosmic binding of souls from an alien monarch. Queen Soraya was already seated in the high chamber when he arrived. Her posture was effortlessly regal, her tunic a deeper shade of silver today, and her ears flicked once at his arrival. A motion he was beginning to associate with barely contained amusement. Around them, the delegates of 16 civilizations were gathered in a floating amphitheater, shaped like an inverted blossom, each petal housing a species whose diplomatic style ranged from icy civility to high-pitched interpretive dance. Lucas took his seat beside Soraya, trying to ignore the stares. It wasn't easy. News of the Soul Shard incident, as it was now lovingly termed by the Galactic press, had spread like wildfire. He could already imagine the headlines. Earthman accidentally marries alien queen, causes minor constitutional crisis. Is it too late to pretend I'm someone else? He muttered to her under his breath. Her eyes didn't leave the delegates. I would recognize you by your walk alone. That's either very sweet or a subtle critique of my posture. Soraya said nothing, but one ear twitched again. He called that a win. The summit began with the usual ceremonial exchange of scents, which involved spritzing coated pheromones into the air. Lucas received a vial labeled Essence of Reluctant Unity and tried not to sneeze when the mist hit his face. The Solgari envoy, a floating jellyfish covered in glittering lenses, offered a scent so pungent that a Yotharian diplomat promptly fainted and had to be revived with electric tongue pulses. Despite the chaos, the first few hours went surprisingly well. Soraya spoke with practiced elegance, her voice amplified by a sonic lace woven into her collar. Lucas mostly nodded, whispered occasional commentary, and tried to hide the fact that he was playing diplomatic bingo in his head. Passive-aggressive compliment and veiled planetary threat got him 2 squares in under 10 minutes. Then the Keldari ambassador leaned forward. We've heard of your binding, she said, her tone slick with curiosity. "Does this mean Earth has pledged allegiance to Velaroon?" Lucas choked on his water. Soraya answered without missing a beat. "It means the Queen of Velaroon honors a life debt in accordance with sacred law. Earth as a planet remains unaffiliated." Soraya's gaze flicked to him. "How do you know this?" "I may have sold parts of those systems back when I was on Vega 4. It was a phase. I needed money for grad school." Murmurs rippled across the room. One delegate openly gasped. The jellyfish lantern creature whispered something into its translation box that came out as fascinatingly unethical. Lucas raised a hand. "In my defense, it was for an art history degree, which explains the poor decisions," Soraya added. He smiled. "Glad to know the Queen's loyalty doesn't exempt me from burns." They traced the signal relay to a shadow company called Cyrex Orbital Logistics, a name so boring it practically screamed evil. Lucas sighed. "We used to call them the people who'd smuggle plutonium if it came in a gift box." The council adjourned with a flurry of data packets and encrypted comms. Soraya pulled Lucas aside as they exited into a quieter corridor, lit by strips of bioluminescent algae embedded in the walls. "You recognize that tech faster than our analysts. Your knowledge is valuable." He held up his hands. "Be careful. That sounds dangerously close to a compliment." She stopped walking. "I bound my soul to yours in a gesture of sacred loyalty. I think I'm allowed one compliment per galactic crisis." Lucas studied her face, noting the faint shadows under her eyes. Even alien queens looked exhausted after political warfare. "You okay?" he asked. "There are too many variables, too many unseen players. I trust few." "Well, lucky for you," he said, nudging her elbow. "I'm not good at playing anything except shuffleboard and sarcasm." She didn't smile exactly, but her expression softened. Her ear twitched again. He took that as a laugh in her language. Later that evening, Lucas returned to his quarters and found his door open. He stepped in carefully, fingers curling around a portable stun device shaped like a tube of lip balm. Standard issue for Earth diplomats who insisted they weren't in danger, but wanted to feel cool about it. Inside, a small mechanical sphere hovered midair, scanning the room with a quiet chirp. It spun toward him. "Unknown biological signature. Hello. Do not panic. This is a subtle intrusion." Lucas lowered the stun device. "Subtle? You broke into my room and announced it." The sphere beeped. "Subtle by galactic diplomatic standards. I am not armed." "Great. That makes two of us." It bobbed closer. "I am here on behalf of a benefactor who wishes to acquire the artifact the Queen gave you. In exchange, you may choose a planetary estate, 100 years of luxury, or the entire vintage film archive of Earth." Lucas squinted. "Wait, you're trying to bribe me with movies?" "Restored in 8D immersion, includes the original director's notes from Fast and Furious, Lunar Justice." He folded his arms. "I don't think you get how sacred the soul shard is. We understand its significance. That is precisely why we want it." Lucas crossed the room, picked up a pillow and chucked it through the sphere. The bot squealed and zipped out the door, trailing sparks. When he told Soraya about it, she didn't even look surprised. "There will be more," she said. "The soul shard is not only symbolic, it grants partial resonance to my psionic signature. With it, someone could mimic my voice print to access royal command nodes." Lucas blinked. "You mean they could pretend to be you?" "For approximately 8 seconds, long enough to do catastrophic things." He whistled. "And here I thought I was just carrying a shiny magic rock. Turns out I'm walking around with the key to your kingdom in my shirt." Soraya tilted her head. "Does that concern you?" "A little," he admitted. "But mostly I'm impressed you trusted me with it." She looked him in the eye. "I still do." Lucas didn't have a response for that. Not one he could say out loud anyway. Later, alone in his room, he held the soul shard in his palm. It pulsed faintly, warm and alive. Somewhere behind all the humor and strange turns his life had taken, he understood that this wasn't just politics. This was the beginning of something deeper, and possibly very, very stupid, which, to be fair, described most of the important things in his life. Lucas was pretty sure that if someone ever made a list of places you should not be while holding the royal soul shard of an alien monarchy, Standing in a floating gondola above a city made entirely of magnetically suspended glass towers during a festival involving copious amounts of fireworks and fermented slug nectar would be somewhere near the top. But there he was, gripping the orb in his pocket and trying not to get vertigo, while a giant balloon shaped like a galactic squid drifted overhead. The ambassador gave a predator's smile. And if Earth were to request an alliance, would your soul binding extend to their defense? Lucas leaned towards Soraya and whispered, "Okay, I get it now. I'm the shiny new toy everyone wants to steal." She murmured back, "You are a symbol of trust, which in diplomacy is more dangerous than a fleet of warships. I really wish someone had told me that before I tackled you." She finally turned to face him fully. "And if they had, would you have stayed behind?" Lucas opened his mouth, closed it, rubbed the back of his neck. "Honestly, I was aiming for the canapé." The session adjourned for mid-cycle refreshments. Soraya led him to a private chamber where the walls gently rotated through scenes from Velarun. Crystalline forests, twin moons, glowing rivers that pulsed with bioluminescent life. Lucas paced in a slow circle, stopping to examine a plant that looked suspiciously like it could slap him. "So, just to clarify," he said, "you're not in love with me, right?" She arched one pale brow. "Would it disturb you if I were?" "No, it would just mean I've got even more people misunderstanding our relationship. The soul shard is not a romantic binding. It is sacred loyalty, a vow of protection, trust, devotion. Got it? So, like an eternal bodyguard, with cool hair." Soraya's expression remained still, but her ear flicked. "You are remarkably casual about sacred rites. I cope with awkwardness through humor. It's either that or cry in the utility closet." They sat in silence for a while, the soul shard resting on the table between them, casting a slow rhythmic glow. Lucas finally exhaled and leaned back. "So, what now?" "Now we prepare," she said, rising. "There will be consequences. Someone tried to assassinate me. That was not a lone act." Lucas frowned. "You think it was part of a bigger plan?" "I know it was. The question is who benefits, and how far they're willing to go." He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time, not as a queen or a glowing presence of otherworldly beauty, but as someone who had made a terrifyingly real choice in the heat of a moment. She hadn't hesitated. She'd given him a piece of her soul. "Guess I'm in this now," he said. "You are." She turned toward the door. "And you still have breakfast on your collar." Lucas looked down. "Well, that explains the strange stares from the Mermathi delegation. I thought they just hated Earth fashion." As they left the chamber, the soul shard pulsed once more, a faint echo of something ancient stirring beneath the politics. Something Lucas couldn't name yet, but knew he was only beginning to understand. Lucas had never been summoned to a war council before. He wasn't sure what to expect, but the room he stepped into didn't scream impending doom so much as high-stakes book club. There were no tactical holograms, no flashing lights or urgent alarm tones, just a long obsidian table around which 10 very serious-looking beings sat, including Soraya, whose expression betrayed no emotion whatsoever. Lucas instinctively tugged on his shirt like a nervous intern showing up at the wrong meeting. "I brought snacks," he muttered to himself, producing a protein bar from his pocket that he immediately stuffed back when one of the delegates hissed at him. Soraya gestured to the empty seat beside her. Lucas sat, trying to appear less like a misplaced tourist and more like someone whose soul was technically bound to royalty. "This is Lucas Tren," she said to the others, her voice cutting clean and cool through the air. "His insight may be unconventional, but it has proven useful." Unconventional. That was a polite way of saying accidental hero with a background in logistics and an unfortunate tendency to make jokes under pressure. The delegate to his left, a creature with translucent skin and drifting internal organs that glowed like jellyfish lanterns, spoke through a device pinned to its collar. "Your presence shifts the balance of alliances. The Queen's bond with you is now a strategic liability, or advantage, depending." Lucas smiled weakly. "I like to think of myself as a surprise variable, Like when a vending machine gives you two snacks instead of one. The delegate blinked its four eyes out of sync. This analogy is confusing and possibly insulting. Then it's working, Lucas whispered to Soraya. The Queen ignored him, turning to another advisor who projected a star map onto the air between them. The attempt on my life originated from orbit. A disguised signal relay was planted aboard the Mermathi delegation cruiser. We suspect a third-party instigator, someone with interest in destabilizing this summit. The holographic projection zoomed in on a triangular cluster of satellites blinking ominously in red. Lucas leaned forward. Wait, that pattern, those relays are illegally modified Proxim-class beacons, used for tight beam encrypted bursts. You can mask an entire assault command behind one. This is diplomacy, he muttered to Soraya, who stood beside him in ceremonial armor, her long ears twitching subtly each time a firework went off too close to their platform. It's called soft power, she replied. Presence is persuasion. Right. So we're not just a couple of high-value targets riding a glass coaster above a crowd of strangers in a city full of known espionage agents. Correct. We are extremely high-value targets riding a glass coaster above a crowd of strangers in a city full of known espionage agents. Great. Just checking. He tried to smile at the gathered onlookers below, many of whom were waving glowing ribbons and shouting words he hoped were festive and not curse-laden insults. One of them tossed a small fruit-like object at him, which exploded into a burst of purple mist upon hitting the floor of the gondola. Fan mail? He asked. Biochemical confetti fruit, Soraya said, brushing the powder off her shoulder. Totally harmless, usually. Lucas looked over the edge of the gondola and tried not to think about how far down usually went in terms of safety standards. The festival was a distraction, a planned public appearance to reaffirm unity, hope, and all those other fine words people preferred hearing, rather than, we suspect someone in this crowd wants to assassinate the Queen again. Lucas had insisted on attending, partly because he felt responsible, and partly because he still didn't understand half of what was happening, and hoped being in the thick of it might help. Also, there had been a rumor that the fermented slug nectar was actually quite good if you pinched your nose. An hour later, after approximately 17 rounds of politely declining alien snacks that looked suspiciously like sentient moss, Lucas found himself backstage in a draped chamber with soft lighting and several guards pretending not to eavesdrop on every syllable. Soraya sat on a bench made of something that shifted colors when touched. You've drawn attention, she said. Every intelligence network within 100 parsecs has logged your biosignature. Let me guess, I'm trending. Worse, you're being auctioned. He blinked. Come again? An encrypted market opened this morning. Your genetic profile, your diplomatic immunity, and your proximity to the soul shard have all been itemized for potential abduction. Lucas sat heavily on the edge of the bench. I always wanted to be famous, just not on the black market. She didn't laugh, but her ear twitched in that way he was beginning to interpret as genuine amusement. You're taking this well. That's because the slug nectar has kicked in. Either that, or I'm having a mild allergic reaction to the powdered confetti fruit. I can't feel my eyebrows. Good, you'll blend in better. She pulled out a data tablet and handed it to him. A blueprint loaded, complex schematics overlaid with blinking markers. This is the Cyrex covert operations ship. It docked under a forged registry 3 days ago. They're planning an infiltration during the next diplomatic assembly. Let me guess. They're after the soul shard. Again, Soraya nodded. And if they can't get it, they may settle for the bonded soul instead. Lucas squinted at the blueprint. So me? Yes. Well, on the bright side, at least I'm finally the protagonist of my own kidnapping story. She didn't smile, but her fingers brushed his for a moment, deliberate, brief. You're not just a protagonist anymore. That comment lingered longer than it should have, hanging in the air like the last note of a song he hadn't realized was playing. He coughed and tapped the screen. What's this room here? That's their central psionic null field. It suppresses neural resonance. If they trap us inside, the bond between us is severed, Lucas finished. Got it. So avoid that room. It's worse than that. Without resonance, the soul shard reverts to its unbound state. Anyone could claim it. Lucas exhaled. Why do I get the feeling you should have led with that? She stood. Because you need to understand the stakes before we face them. He stood as well. So what's the plan? Tonight, we infiltrate the Cyrex ship before the assembly, steal their field disruptor, and disable the null zone. Us? As in you and me? We're going full espionage now. Would you prefer I send someone else with your soul attached to them? Point taken. Lead on, Your Majesty of the Sneaky. They left through an unmarked exit that opened into a private hangar. The ship Soraya had chosen was small, dark, and decidedly unroyal. Lucas paused before stepping inside. Just curious, how many covert operations have you done before? 3, successfully. And how many not successfully? 2. We don't speak of those. The flight was short but tense, lit only by the dull orange of approaching dusk and the quiet hum of a ship pretending not to exist. They docked onto the underbelly of the Cyrex vessel with the silence of professionals, or at least of 2 people very determined not to get shot. Inside, they moved through tight corridors painted in matte black and lined with coolant pipes. Lucas tried not to think about all the ways things could go wrong. Soraya moved like she belonged there, each step efficient and quiet. Lucas tried to imitate her and succeeded in tripping only once, catching himself on a wall that promptly hissed at him. Structural breathing panels, Soraya whispered. Don't lean on them. Good tip, he whispered back. Add that to the growing list of alien things that hate me. They reached the null field room without incident. The hum of dampened resonance filled the air, a cold, hollow feeling that made Lucas's teeth itch. Inside the chamber, 2 guards stood watch over the disruptor unit, which resembled a very angry espresso machine. Soraya motioned for silence. She tapped a device at her belt. A second later, the lights flickered. The guards looked at each other. Lucas, taking his cue, lunged forward with a noise that he hoped sounded heroic and not like someone choking on a protein bar. The fight was short and involved more elbowing than actual skill. One guard hit the wall and got stuck in a self-sealing stasis gel. The other tripped on Lucas's foot, screamed something untranslatable, and face-planted into a panel. See? Lucas panted. I have combat instincts. They're just weirdly timed. Soraya deactivated the field. The hum vanished. The soul shard in Lucas's pocket pulsed warm again. You did well, she said, touching his arm. He gave a shaky grin. Does that mean I get to pick the next mission? Because I vote for one involving room service and 0 magnetic mines. She led him out through the shadowy corridor with a smirk. We'll negotiate. Lucas wasn't sure if she meant the next mission or the future in general. Either way, he was starting to feel like he'd already agreed to something much bigger than either of them fully understood. The throne room was not supposed to smell like burnt coolant and emergency foam, but here they were. Lucas stood in the center of the fractured floor, still holding the soul shard in his hand like it was a stress ball. While around him, half the royal guards scrambled to restore control, and the other half tried to clean up what remained of the Cyrex infiltrators. One of them had somehow wedged himself into an ornamental fountain shaped like a spiral nebula. He refused to come out, muttering something about diplomatic immunity and interstellar gluten allergies. Tell me again, Lucas said, why the final phase of the Cyrex plan involved hijacking the royal AI and making it host a mandatory poetry slam? Soraya, wearing scorched armor and a single eyebrow raised, gestured to the shattered core console. Because their intelligence officer is obsessed with Terran spoken word, they thought it would destabilize the monarchy through lyrical embarrassment. Well, it nearly worked. I've never seen a room full of ambassadors look so panicked at the phrase, cosmic yearning in my cortical yearning. She winced. Yes, you almost started a diplomatic incident with that line. Hey, in my defense, I was improvising while dodging plasma bolts, and maybe expressing myself. One of the guards passed them at a brisk jog, saluting Soraya while avoiding eye contact with Lucas. Ever since the explosion, everyone had started calling him soulbound, usually in a tone that suggested reverence mixed with deep confusion. He watched as Soraya bent down to examine a collapsed support beam, her long ears twitching slightly as she processed incoming reports through her neural link. She had been doing that a lot lately, processing, calculating, protecting, always composed, always a queen. And yet, he'd seen her throw herself in front of an energy blast meant for him. She hadn't even hesitated. The memory refused to leave. He cleared his throat. So, I guess that's it then. Cyrex foiled, AI unhijacked, poetry purged. Mostly, we'll need at least 2 cycles to restore the throne AI's emotional subroutines. It keeps trying to narrate political briefings in iambic pentameter. You're welcome. For what? For saving the monarchy from interpretive dance. That's what it was building up to, you know? She looked at him, her gaze softening for a moment. You joke a lot when you're unsettled. I joke a lot in general, but yes, this is me unsettled. Look, Soraya. He hesitated, gripping the soul shard like it might give him courage. Back when you gave me this, I didn't understand what it meant. I thought it was just some ceremonial trinket with good lighting effects. She smiled. The lighting is programmable, but now I get it. The bond, it's not just symbolic, it's real. I can feel it. Not in some magical fantasy way, but like you're always there, just under my skin. Not watching, not judging, just present. I am, she said simply. I know, and I'm not sure I'm the kind of guy who should have something this important. I mean, my most valuable skill until recently was being able to make a grilled cheese sandwich using nothing but a plasma torch and sarcasm. You undervalue yourself, severely. That's probably true, but I also know that I've changed. A lot. I used to think responsibility was a thing you handed to people who wore fancier shoes. But now, he glanced around the ruined chamber. Now I think I understand why you carry so much. Why you gave me this. Not because I earned it, but because you believed I could. She stepped closer. You've proven it. He held out the soul shard. So what happens now? Do I give it back? Do I keep it? Do I get a pension plan? She took his hand instead of the shard. The bond cannot be undone. Not without both of us choosing to sever it. That's not something we can decide lightly. Lucas laughed. I barely trust myself to choose cereal in the morning. But you chose to protect my people, to stand by me when you had every reason to run. That tells me more than any ceremony. He looked at their joined hands. Then I guess we're stuck with each other. Or elevated by each other. Don't get poetic. That's how this whole thing almost fell apart. She rolled her eyes, but her fingers tightened on his. Later, after the fires were extinguished and the dignitaries had been unpanicked, the palace held an emergency celebration. Apparently, royal protocols required a symbolic unifying event after any coup attempt. And if there was one thing this planet knew how to do, it was throw a party with unnecessary grandeur. Lucas stood on the dais beside Soraya as holograms of stars danced around them, programmed to simulate celestial alignment. He was wearing robes he didn't understand and shoes that made him walk like a newborn deer. A small alien child wandered up to him and tugged his sleeve. Are you a prince now? Lucas crouched. Technically, no. I'm more like an emotionally confused space consultant. The child frowned. Is that higher or lower than a duke? Depends on the planet and the number of laser burns involved. Satisfied, the child scampered off, probably to tell someone that the soulbound was either royalty or a baked good. Soraya joined him, her gown woven with strands of reactive light. You handled that well. I lie to children all the time. It's a gift. She tilted her head. You still doubt yourself. Every 5 minutes. But I'm starting to think that might just be part of the job. You're right. I hate when you say that. No, you don't. He didn't. Later, as the crowd celebrated and fireworks danced through artificial constellations above them, Soraya pulled him aside. She held out a small, crystalline object, not unlike the soul shard, but different, less radiant, more intricate. This is not another binding, is it? No, she said. It's a key. To what? To my private quarters. Subtle. I'm a queen. Subtlety is survival. He took it. So, what now? Now, she said, we find out what loyalty truly means when no one's watching. He looked out over the city that had once tried to kill him, the people who now called him guardian, and the woman who had bound her soul to his without asking for anything in return. Somewhere along the way, he'd stopped being lost. All right, he said, but I'm still keeping the fancy shoes. She smiled. Deal. And as the stars wheeled above them in quiet choreography, Lucas held the key in one hand, the shard in the other, and knew for the first time in his life that he wasn't just part of someone else's story, he was home.